So when I first started working with these boys, like 4.5 years ago, you hear the story, you see the topography of the behaviors come in, and you're like, oh yeah, ADHD, OCD, anxiety, autism, like these are my jams. I'm really good at treating this stuff. Well, should be quick work. So I started doing basic things like breathing and relaxation training and helping kids start to learn how to self-soothe, and found that I was just making things worse. So that made zero sense. And so what I started to do was pull out what we call biofeedback equipment, where lets us look at how people's bodies from a stress response sort of function and respond to stimulus, and provide that feedback and train them to combat that, right? And to control their bodies in different ways. So the picture in front of you is kind of what I call the window of tolerance. And so at the top, we have like that fight, flight, freeze sort of window. And at the bottom, we would have that like flatness, somnolence, sleeping, collapse to a degree could also go down there. So it's kind of like the over under sort of response. Your sympathetic response, right, is our activating response, and our parasympathetic is our shutting down response. And so what I started to see when I hooked these boys up was very different than the patterns that we'd anticipate to see. So all of us over time, from a biophysiological stress standpoint or activating standpoint, have a pattern, unless you're a manifesting mom carrier or you have Duchenne or Becker, have a stress response pattern that's going to look more like this, unless you're pretty anxious, and then you might have higher swings that sustain longer and take longer to come down, just because your body is kind of trained to hold on to that a bit longer. And so you're kind of just like, you're going throughout the day, and you relax and you're sitting and your body calms, and then you get going and it kind of activates, and it just, this homeostasis of regulation kind of works for you throughout the day. I'm not an anxious person, but if you haven't picked up on it, I'm a kind of hyperactive person, and I got a lot of energy. So I walk to work, and so I being a hyperactive person, am startle sensitive, right? I have a big startle response. I can be jumpy, right? Because I'm kind of going all the time. So I'm walking to work. If I almost get hit by a car, right, I'm gonna have a big swing and arousal. I'm gonna feel that because I'm at the top of my window, right? I'm swinging close to the top of my window of tolerance. So what I might notice is I might notice I get hot. I might notice that my heart rate increases. I might notice like my fingers get cold. I might notice a change in my thinking, right? I might have been like listening to my audiobook on my way to work, having a great time. And all of a sudden I'm like cussing this guy out in my head and being like, watch where you're going, right? And then I'm like angry. I'm like, okay, calm down. I keep walking. Couple minutes, I'm going to shut back down. I'm going to feel fine. And it will be a distant memory by the time I get to work and get distracted. So, right, our body kind of is like, whoa, okay, not a real threat. We're fine. And it shuts itself down. So when I started hooking these boys up, I noticed a pattern. In the years I've been doing this, I have never not seen this pattern in a kid that I do this with, or a young man or a mom carrier, manifesting carrier, not mosaic, manifesting carrier. Not that they're not out there. I just probably haven't met them yet. So I would really love to meet them, because I'm fascinated if they don't have this pattern. And what I see is this in these boys. So this is problematic for all sorts of reasons. And this is a very chronic, insidious build of arousal over time. And what happens when you're in this space is all sorts of things. When we have this chronic physiological pattern like you're seeing here, we don't learn as well. Our body is under a ton of stress. Our brain is impacted. Our health is impacted, right? Our ability to soothe ourselves are impacted. Our executive control, our memory, all these things are impacted when you live here. A similar way that might, like other people, right, that maybe have a similar pattern that don't have Duchenne, or people that maybe live in a very stressful environment all the time, like a war zone, right? Where you're kind of always need to be on edge. Your body always needs to be kind of ready. You're always very heightened, and your brain is always kind of like keeping itself safe. Or other trauma survivors, right? So their brain actually does kind of have that in a way of a trauma brain, even though they're not,